AI agents are one of the biggest stories of 2025. But what exactly do they do? There may be no one better to answer that question than Jeff Scheidel, VP of Operations for authID. I'm Joel McConvey, and on the final Biometric Update podcast of the year, I talked to Jeff about where we're at with AI agents and where we're going. To start, I do want to ask you if you will just give us a brief refresher on authID. Where is the company at in its journey? Where is it going in 2026?
Sure. All right, so authID has been in the biometric space for years, been used for through the Department of Homeland Security, United Nations. We managed, for example, elections in other countries, make sure people can only register once and vote once. Use a lot in the financial space, in workforce and in consumer, to make sure that people who show up for a job are actually who they claim to be. Used for distance learning, make sure people show up for classes and for testing are who they claim to be. But quite a bit in both consumer and workforce. What we've done in the last year, and which I expect to be huge in the coming year, big more on the workforce on, for example, distributed workforces. You've got, for example, you have large projects, organizations that use a lot of contractors and third parties and vendors. And you make sure that when those people come into the fold, that they are recognized and invited to join a central repository. And we say, okay, now you're going to biometrically register basically with that central repository. So now you are centrally managed, not just in that contractor, that vendor, that third party, especially when you talk about supply chain. You've got all these different parties who present risk. They provide a lot of productivity, also provide a lot of risk. That's our IDX platform. So our identity exchange. So we bring those people into the central fold. They can be managed, they can be granted rights, they can also be centrally revoked as needed. We can even rotate those keys. We launched a while back Privacy Key, which is when we biometrically verify someone, instead of saying I keep your face, because that's a big compliance no-no for the GDPR. I'm in Illinois with the BIPA law on storage of biometrics and so on. And it's just privacy and concerns that people have. We use your face as a seed to create a public key that we store in the cloud. That is your verifiable credential. Every time after that you authenticate, we use your face to recreate a private key. Nothing stored on the user's device. This is all done in real time. We recreate the private key, they exchange an encrypted message, and we say, okay, we have a match, that's you. There's no biometric data stored whatsoever. When we're talking about the distributed workforce, people worry about, well, I'm going to work for you, but my own users, my laborers don't want their faces anywhere. And that happens with fintech, any kind of industry. So we're protecting privacy, but it also allows us to do that one-to-one match. I can quickly say, I've seen that face before, but again, it's all done through public key and not through actual facial images. Mm-hmm. And then we recently launched, and we just had a press release about it 2 weeks ago, our mandate, our framework for Agentic AI. And what we do is when someone goes to launch an AI agent, we produce a custom claim that can be transmitted through OIDC and a variety of other protocols that agent is invoked only with its human sponsors verified biometric credential. And that can be passed down through agent to agent. When you're talking about, for example, shopping, we just demonstrated for liminal shopping, among other A2A use cases or flows. That custom claim with that credential can be passed along through that chain. If at any point someone says, you know what, I do want to verify that at one more time, we can be federated out to and request, someone could request an additional biometric authentication from the user. Typically, that's not going to be necessary. But that credential that goes along with that agent provides that scope for what that agent's allowed to do. And then also its auditability. Who is the human sponsor accountable for what that agent did after the fact? So, and again, we're using that public key, that credential that we express, and we're using a Web 3.0 credential for that.
All right.
So this is where we're going forward. That's going to be a big thing for us. Human in the loop, because the way people are doing a lot of agentic AI governance is still machine ID and that sort of thing, and shared API keys and bearer tokens. Okay, but we're having that human accountability, that human sponsor for that AI agent invocation.
Yeah, you really need that bond with the human oversight in the end, right? That's sort of something a lot of people are looking at. Before we get too deep into AI agents, I want to just ask about the key system. Is that sort of based on the FIDO passkey model, or is that a variant on that?
That is PKI. We do have the ability to do, we do use FIDO in certain cases, including with IDX, but no, it is not strictly based on FIDO. It is not. Our passkeys. We can generate and actually allow users to reclaim passkeys, for example, when we change devices, because passkeys are typically device bound.
Yeah.
But no, it is PKI. It is public private key pair.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about agents, and I want to talk about the workplace because there's a lot of talk both in terms of how agentic AI is going to transform the workplace, but you have these massive authentication problems. You have a expanded risk surface. So, in terms of employment, how is this confluence of AI agents and a new sort of entry point for fraud changing how we understand work? What do you think is going to happen in the next year in terms of how people go about hiring, authentication in the workplace, these kinds of things?
So in terms of hiring, okay, let's even talk old school. I know what it's like to, I was at a company and we had a meeting in San Jose in 2017 and one guy had interviewed, but another guy showed up. And so it's how you represent yourself, and people are using AI agents and unfortunately deepfakes as well to represent themselves throughout the hiring process. We use AI, and now people are using AI agents more and more for HR functions, including background checks. And so you want to make sure that information is accurate because you want to be fair to both parties. People are using AI more and more for their work. We're doing a project today, and we're using it this morning, and we're using AI to help us create content and correlate content for a presentation. But you want to make sure that you still, again, have the human in the loop and there's still accountability. We use them for personal assistance and also for reporting. It's as these things have more and more access to systems. So here's a use case that was brought to my attention. I'm going to use AI to do some sales reporting. Okay, I'm going to say which of my reps has sold the most this quarter, this year, this whatever. Okay, now let's and this is another organization, by the way. It wasn't ours. Okay, let's go to the HR system and let's pull out salaries and see which sales reps have sold and basically paid for themselves this year. I have access to that, and then the agent has access to that. Now, the misuse would be, okay, as long as you're doing that, you're going to the HR system and pull up their salaries and grab their social security numbers and their home addresses. You know, what's the scope? What are the permissions these things have? So in the old days, we worried about service accounts. And they would you don't query the database, you query a service account, and it queries the database for you. Same thing with print queues and that sort of thing. Now you've got far more intelligent service accounts, when I call them that, these agents that have more access, and then through prompt injection, you can have them do a lot more acrobatics than a service account. So you have to govern these things. You have to make sure that you are completely, utterly locked down. I know what it's like to work at a fraud prevention startup where we even locked down who could use the printer, because in theory, someone could print out PII on the printer. Now you've got an AI agent that you could say, hey, go get this data, and while you're at it, go send it to this other location, print it out for me, send it to me in an email. You can do all sorts of very intelligent things with them. Their intelligence makes them incredibly productive, also makes them incredibly dangerous. So that's why you have to have that kind of workflow control. RPA. So I've been in the identity access management space for about 40 years for recertification of access rights. Every year you say, well, who has access to what and can they still keep it? For little stuff, like can you still have access to the 401k app? Can you still get to the printer? Can you still do database queries? You might say, those are all low risk. I'll automatically have them, through RPA, have them approved, certified for another year. If it's something more sensitive, maybe somebody's to look at it. Now people are using AI for that. But again, it's dangerous because it's more intelligent and it can be used for things it's not meant for.
So let's talk about compliance and regulation. This is a big piece of the puzzle. What do you think the right balance is between regulating these things, regulating AI, and allowing it to sort of do what it's intended to do?
Yeah, you don't want to throttle it, right? Or at birth, but you do want to establish those kinds of protocols early on, and people already have, but they're actually kind of primitive. I look at what DHS came up with in 2024. It's still barely scratching the surface. EU came up with the AI Act last year. It's about risk categorization. So what they're doing is they're setting the stage for what people ought to do, but they're not actually telling people what they ought to do yet, or putting really strict standards on it. They're more recommendations or guidelines than they are rules. I think that is absolutely still evolving. ISO IC 42001 talks about the ethical use. Well, who decides what's ethical? Right? So again, they're guidelines. They're actually not. I don't see really strict stuff. NIST AI risk management framework. It says govern, map, measure, manage. Okay, but again, it's very very loose. HIPAA and GDPR. And of course, a lot of the state laws in the U.S. about biometric storage, for example, are based on GDPR. They're all they're doing is they're extending the concept of AI to the rules they already had in place, for example, for the privacy of minors, of electronic health records. They're just taking what they already had and just saying, well, now AI can't do that anymore either. Now you have the technical aspects of it. How do I keep AI from doing that? But right now, I don't see really strict rules on it. I see a lot of recommendations. So I think that's still got to shake itself out.
Do you think it's sort of lagging behind in terms of the pace of innovation?
In terms of the governance piece, yes, I do.
Okay.
Again, I don't see really strict stuff. I see at a technical level where it's possible to do, but no one is saying you absolutely have to govern it this way. I don't see it.
Do you think that's coming?
So, oh yeah, absolutely. All it's going to take is the first. Well, okay, you had the guy who used was it Claude to find his all his victims and create the malware and even calculate how much ransom he would demand from each one based on their financial posture. You're going to see once you have the first major few breaches that hit, for example, utilities, gas, electric, water. When you see those kinds of things, that people will be enacting laws overnight in a panic. Now, unfortunately, that's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
But I think in the meantime, the industry is saying on its own, okay, we want to avoid fraud, we want to avoid supply chain issues. When all the UK retailers got hit a couple of months ago, it was supply chain, it was payment systems, like they were shut down. MGM and Caesar's Palace, especially MGM got crippled. But that was still old school stuff. All right, that was social engineering. AI is that on beyond steroids. Once you see those kinds of nefarious acts taking place through AI, which makes it far easier and its scale, then you'll see people jumping on the bandwagon real quick to come up with laws that are very specific as opposed to what we have now.
Right. Yeah. Once the lights go off, that's when the emergency bell goes off, right?
Yep. When the lights go off, that's exactly it.
Let's talk a little bit about AI on a high level. There's a lot invested in this technology economically. There's a talk about a bubble, that this is going to burst. And yet a lot of that is sort of focused on the Gen AI side, on companies like OpenAI and LLM chatbots. And then there's this sort of whole horde of other use cases that are industry specific and actually much more useful, if you ask some, but maybe sort of like, lumped in with this economically, culturally, whatever, with this terminology AI. What do you think is going to happen with all this? Where is this all going?
People worry about it's going to take all the jobs away. We heard the same thing when the internet was still kicking in. I remember going to Internet World at Jacob Javits Center, December '96, and people go, "Oh my gosh, the internet's going to take away all the jobs." AI actually, it's already to some degree happening. AI is going to be, it's obviously a huge productivity thing. But people are still saying, well, how can I build things out of this? How can I create more things? How can I be more creative with it? It's going to govern supply chain. It's going to govern transmission of records. As far as a bubble goes, okay, so Enron was an old customer of mine, and it was all the Enron groups that were all selling to each other. So it looked like all this commerce was going on. In fact, it was just money circulating, almost like the air in your car when you say just recirculate the air. So it looked like there was a lot of stuff going on. A lot of these companies are selling to each other. So that's the bubble aspect of it. But the fact is, there's a ton of investment. Data centers. Got one going to go up by me probably in the next 2 years, about 15 minutes away. The data centers are going to be everywhere. It's all going to be based on AI. So we've only scratched the surface of where it's going to take us.
And so bubble wise, you think that's not something people should be worrying about?
I don't. I think that at some point people AI it's just going to be like, okay, personal assistants. People are already using AI to do shopping for them and to plan their travel and that kind of thing. So it's actually at a personal level as well. It's not just going to be an industrial level. But then you're going to have companies that'll figure out, how do I cash in on that in a bigger way? Okay, nobody ever needed Facebook until they wanted Facebook, and then they go, oh, now I can sell ads to those people. I mean, it's going to be the same thing as there are already companies that supply AI tools for personal use. They're going to figure out how to increasingly make revenue off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And there'll be all new industry. How do I sell ads to you while you're using your AI personal assistant to do your shopping or plan your travel?
Mm-hmm.
So there's whole things we haven't even scratched there. I think that's it's just like you apply for a credit card, next thing you know, you're getting magazine subscription come-ons. I think that as people use AI in their personal lives more and more, companies will figure out how to cash in on that in a bigger way.
So before we finish, I just want to ask, we're doing a bit of a year in review here, and also looking ahead to 2026. So do you have any predictions for 2026, either in terms of authID or the landscape in general, AI agents, digital credentials, any of this stuff that's brewing?
I think increasingly we're going to have to tie, this is what we do, specifically, tie human agents to AI agents. Who is actually making that request? Who's doing what? And who's responsible for it? Even like in the payments industry, we do that now. Hey, I didn't authorize that payment. I was hacked. Like, no, it wasn't. Only your digital signature through your facial biometric could have instigated that payment. That was you. There's none of this first party fraud or mule stuff. You'll see more and more of that need to tie humans to what AI agents do. Otherwise, people say, there's no culpability. And that's going to be at a large scale as well. Supply chain is increasingly an issue here. It's a big topic within even the federal government. Okay, because that's accounts for a lot of inflation. Fraud happens in supply chain and lack of productivity and efficiency in the supply chain. That's affecting the whole economy. AI can certainly help with that, but can also again be an agent for fraud. So you'll see more and more AI being used for tracking every kind of transaction, whether it's small or massive. But again, it's got to be tied back to the person or persons who initiate those actions to make sure you can track back to who started whatever. For us, we're making sure that there's a biometric credential tied to every transaction, every onboarding, every authentication, every AI agent invocation, to always say I've got who's allowed to do what, and then who did what after the fact. And this is where we play. It's always that absolute proof of life that's attached to every action. You can't say, well, I blame my machine for that. You can't do that. Who is responsible? Who has the rights to do what? But we're big in the distributed workforce, which you see more and more because of all the remote work. COVID was the accelerator for that, and then also the agentic AI. But that is absolutely where we're going.
Right on.
That's where the world is.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, Jeff, it's fascinating to listen to you. You've obviously seen just about everything in this industry over your years, and so appreciate you sharing the knowledge. It's really nice to get the perspective of someone who is this deep into the game.
It's, I start with name and password or, Fred Flintstone stuff. We're way past that. If people want to still use it, great. But unless I can say that's you live, and by the way, it's not a deep fake, a picture, a replay, a video. It was you live in front of the camera. Unless I can determine that, you could be anything at all.
Well, again, it's been great to chat, and I'll tell you what, I'll get my AI agents to organize a follow-up call sometime in 2026, and we'll touch base then.
Thank you, Joel, for your time. Appreciate it, sir.
Thanks again to Jeff Scheidel. If you want to know more about authID, visit them at authID.ai. For all the latest biometrics and digital identity news, visit biometricupdate.com. And from the BU podcast, a very happy holidays. We'll see you all in 2026.